Hey everybody, today I want to talk about how you balance work as a priority. Now, everyone has different philosophies on here, but I kind of want to just point out a few things that people may not have considered to just kind of guide them to their own conclusion about how much work you should put in. Now, this video was inspired by a YouTuber by the name of Graham Stevenson, who is basically this YouTuber with over 1 million subscribers, and he made a video about a year ago titled "The Problem with Gary Vaynerchuk." Now, if you don't know who Gary Vaynerchuk is, he's basically the guy who is huge on Instagram, huge on pretty much a lot of social media. I've been following him for several years. He's written a few books. He's early investor in Facebook and a few other apps, and he gives a lot of self-development advice. Sorry, his name was Graham Steven, not Graham Stevenson. And so Graham Steven made this video basically saying that, like, you know what, Gary has a ton of followers and he's a really cool guy and I follow all of his stuff and read his books, but his whole idea that you should work 18 hours a day is wrong, because I did that, and sure, it exploded my real estate career, but I was lonely, I didn't have friends, I didn't know how to interact with people, and I used work as an excuse to hide behind for every possible thing else in my life, and I made it a reason for why I couldn't do other stuff. So basically, this man Graham, who is still fairly young, he's like in his early 30s, and what seems to be a millionaire, he's basically calling out hard work. So I guess that's the first big point I want to address. I think a lot of people assume that just working harder is the obvious answer, because you hear that a lot. You hear a lot of successful people saying, work 18 hours a day, work as much as possible. That's how I've succeeded. And there is a grain of truth to that, but in Graham's case, he lost out on a lot of experiences he had as a kid, and Gary Vaynerchuk has said the same thing. He says if he could redo his college years, he says he would have gone out more and hooked up more. So in terms of that, you will make some sacrifices, but you don't have to, completely, go away. You can compromise to an extent. Maybe it's just once every month or once every couple weeks, but you can have a normal life. And then there's the developmental part. Some people are able to pick up social skills and all that stuff from their job, through their sales job, but others, they need regular social bonding, not just for developing social skills and empathy and understanding, but also for general happiness and well-being, to make those friends, to have that mental health. All those things matter. Like, if someone sees that you don't have friends, it's not a good vibe, because then they think, oh, this guy is probably a bit weird, probably doesn't understand social skills. So it matters on a lot of different aspects of your life. And I'm not knocking Gary or Graham, because Gary himself will admit that he thinks every person should pursue what they want. So if their priorities are family time, then they should work less and have family. So I think a lot of people misunderstand Gary's advice as just work super hard. He's actually saying, choose your priorities to live a happy life. But if you're complaining about making more income, then work. So it's not just a blind, just work as hard as possible. But I think, my point is to just kind of bring up these other issues at play here. So another thing that Graham said is excuses. That's another part of the workaholic mindset. And now, here's the thing, only like 1% of the population really fall into this workaholic addicted culture. I mean, very few people do have the tenacity to work 12 hours or 13 hours a day. Most people complain about working 6 or 7 hours a day. So this doesn't really apply to a lot of people, but for those who it does apply to, it can be such a big excuse. Work can be the excuse for everything, and it can ruin your romantic relationships. It can be the excuse for not having time for others, not having time to meet other people, not having time to develop your other traits, go to the gym, exercise, to spend time with family, a bunch of other possibly important priorities. And for some people, it's intuitive that these matter more than money or work, but for others, they just think that success means as much money as possible and as much work as possible. And in Graham's case, and many others, other people that I've met in person, as well as a lot of other successful people I've studied, like say Ariana Huffington, she wrote a whole book called The Sleep Revolution because she collapsed from exhaustion from overwork. And her whole thesis is to like spend as much time as you need to sleep more. So you can kind of take that conclusion in multiple ways. Hers was to sleep more, but for me and for others, it was basically what I learned from others was that, sometimes it just means working less. You can, I know, and especially with women, I've met more women than men who have told me that they've literally had really horrible health issues because they just work themselves to death. And there's this huge growing standard. I read a study the other day that said that there's a correlation between how many hours a woman puts into work every week and how low her self-esteem gets. And I got it from the book Finding Flow by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. It's a very famous book on achieving happiness at work. And basically, well, I think it's his sequel. Flow is his famous book. Finding Flow is like another one of his sequel books. But the point is, in his book, he inferred that the reason there's this correlation was because as women got higher in the workforce, they put higher standards on themselves, which made their self-esteem go down, even though they were achieving more. So think about how sad that is. So that's another thing. We put these high standards on ourselves, and at some point, I think it's important to address, like, what are you getting out of this income? What will you buy with this, and will that actually improve the quality of your life? What if you're just buying another yacht or adding another 50 feet to your house, and that's literally doing nothing? And what are you sacrificing because of that? Sometimes the sacrifice is worth it. Maybe it's going from living minimal wage to a better life for your family. But sometimes it's not. Are you sacrificing a trip to Disney World with your children, as Warren Buffett says, for 20 feet on your yacht 50 years from now? Is that really worth it? No. So Warren Buffett's point was on extreme frugality, but the same point can be used for something very similar, which is where you draw the line on work. So Pat Flynn is another great example. He makes a killing, over $1 million a year, and he has for the last several years, from his blog smartpassiveincome.com, and he releases income reports every month. And now I think he switched to annual reports because he just doesn't have the time. But he's talked about how much he works, and he says, on a very busy week when there's a book launch, he'll work for 50 hours, maybe 60 a week, but for a lot of the other regular hours, he'll work, 20 to 30 to 40, and he has a couple assistants that helps him out. And if you look at his Instagram, he's always with his family. He's always connecting and spending time with them. And it just goes to show you that, like, you don't have to, like, there is a possibility. It's not easy, but it is possible to reach the income you want and not kill yourself working all that time and spend time with your family. And part of that is, working smarter. And, some people aren't cut out to be entrepreneurs and run an online business like Pat Flynn, but maybe there's another way. In terms of workaholism, I don't think most people suffer from it for the most part. Like some people do get second jobs and stuff, but I don't think it's that crazy. But for those 1% who are, those management consultants, I've known them, I've talked to them, who work 60, 70, 80 hours a week. And they forsake their health, they forsake maybe their spirituality, they forsake other priorities, whether it's friends, family, romantic relationships, friendships. That's something to address because it could, cause regret in the future. Sometimes it's not just about putting more hours in the gym. There's that saying, more hours at work. There's that saying that says, no one ever says on their deathbed that they wish they would have spent more time working. And I think that's a huge regret that people make, not spending enough time with their loved ones. That said, there's also the other tipping point where, and I've experienced this, where you spend so much time with your family that they're just kind of sick of you, or they're bored of you, or they're like, man, go away. I want to play these video games. And then that's when you can be like, okay, peace out. So there is that other tipping point of diminishing returns where like your family, especially when they hit the teenage years, those children or siblings, they don't want to spend time with you. And if you force that, it's just going to get worse. So there is like a tipping point where you can be like, yes, I can work more. Yes, I could do my own stuff. But most people aren't there. So, I mean, those are some of the main things I wanted to kind of point out. I mean, there's other issues and problems with working too much. And for most people, maybe they don't work enough, or they're not managing their time as effectively. But I guess for the few workaholics out there, I think it's important to address because I think it's a tragedy in and of itself, and I want to help these people because think about it, like they think they're succeeding, they think they're doing the right thing, and in a way they are achieving so much, they are doing stuff that other people aren't willing to put in the suffering to do, and yet even though they think they're doing the right thing, sometimes it is the wrong thing. Sometimes there is a line to be drawn, and sometimes these people just have never considered prioritizing other stuff and treating themselves. So treat yourself.